Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, I got some permission to go over. Woo! Don't tell on us. All right. So where we're picking up today is the chapter, There is a Solution. And we're on page 18, and we're going to be diving into the bottom paragraph. Now, bottom paragraph, page 18. Now, this bottom paragraph, in parts of the world, not this part of the world, not the part of the world that I live in, but where Rob lives in Ontario, there are some people who call this the sponsorship contract. And you might be like, why do they call it that? Well, this is a description of who I need to be to work with others and how I am called to show up to work with others. Now, if you are like, girl, I'm feeling pedantic today, which sounds like a fun time for you. You do you. Hey, that word is not found in the first 164 pages of this book. It doesn't say sponsor in this thing. That's cool. You're right. It doesn't. But the job description is all over it. And so this is the job description. So, and I'll point out, we're in the chapter, there is a solution, and the solution we have is a spiritual awakening. But the most sure sign of a spiritual awakening is the desire to help somebody else. So what we're talking about is that we've got to work with others, that to carry this message. That's a part of this thing. That is a responsibility that is given to all of us. So it's important. That's all I'll say. It's important. All right. So it says that the man who is making the approach. Now, when we go into the book, we'll often experience things that are contrariwise to what we hear in the rooms or what we might have even thought was true, which is, oh, well, I raised my hand at a meeting. Or, well, I'm the sponsor. If they want what I have, they've got to ask me. But what is the first thing that this paragraph is saying? That the man who is making the approach, I've got to approach them. If I am the recovered alcoholic, if I have taken the course of action that is laid out in this book, I've got to find people to work with. I don't wait for them to come to me. That will happen. That will happen. But I've got to go out and seek them and find them. And again, that's like a little counterculture to things that we might be familiar with. And if that feels like a little like, oh, that's okay. Sit with the discomfort. Let's have a new experience. But yeah, what I am called to do is reach out to them to get their number. Now, in-person meetings, we can always tell who's new. And they make it easy at this one to kind of tell who's new or coming back because we ask and raise hands and hop on in. And so it's wonderful to give them our number. But if you've ever put your number on a meeting list, you know you don't get calls. Man, I've got like maybe one call a year at most for putting my number on meeting lists. And so what is more powerful? That I ask politely, with consent and respect, for their number. I get their number so that I can reach out to them. I can approach them. So it says that the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty. So that common problem that I can share, like we were talking about at the end of last week, that common problem. I'm armed with facts about myself that I know from my own experience what it is like to have the allergy of the body. And for those that are new, what we're talking about is that I can share from my own experience what it is like to take that drink and have that drink take me. I know what it's like to take that drink and miss the mark. Drink beyond lines in the sand I said I would never cross. Drink into consequences I never wanted to have happen to me. That. But also just as important, if not more important, is the ability to share from my own experience what it is like to go back to the first drink after I have said I will never do it again. That is the obsession of the mind. And so that we have that same difficulty. And then it says that he obviously knows what he is talking about. And how do I obviously know what I'm talking about? Of course, it's important to study the book. And of course, it's important to relate my experience as it is outlined in this book. But what we're talking about is I've got to have experience, not just with the problem, but I've got to have experience with our solution, that spiritual awakening, that I grow and that I deepen. Or another way to say it is spiritual awakenings. Because I couldn't stay well on one drink. I can't stay well on one spiritual experience. But also that I have lived experience with the program of action, these 12 steps. That is what allows me to obviously know what I'm talking about, not just pontificate ideas, but to share with you what I have done and just experience, and not just what I have done, but what I am doing. That it is not a far gone experience, that it is a current lived experience. What is my current experience with inventory? What is my current experience with amends? What is my current experience with working with others, with prayer and with meditation? That. So it goes on to say that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer. I want to point out it is our deportment that shouts. I know I get a little enthusiastic and a little loud. I'm not supposed to shout at people. That's not what, do it. Ah! Actually, back in the day, I had my friend, just the sweetest, loveliest, little goofball of a human being, just such a lovely person. We were outside a meeting, the post-meeting cigarette, and people are loud and talking, and then it's one of those moments, as soon as everybody gets quiet, my sweet little friend says, do the steps or I'll kill you. It's like, girl, just aggressive. That would be the shouting. Which, it was so funny because that's not who that person is. And it was in reference to somebody else, but people got quiet at the wrong moment. All right. So, and as Rob put in the chat, the deportment in the 1930s was in reference to our conduct and our behavior. It's not. My deportment shouting has nothing to do with wearing a suit and tie from the podium. If you want to do that because it makes you feel good, you go do that. Absolutely. But it is about how I live my life. It is about that light in our eyes that people can see, the change in our spirit, that joy that pervades. That is what is doing the shouting to the new prospect, that we are a person with a real answer. That's what we're called to do. And bear with me with this. I was talking with somebody last Sunday and he was struggling because, his sponsee had drifted away. And that happens. And that can happen when we're doing the deal and we're on fire for this thing. But it's also important for me to remember it's hard to catch fire from something that's lukewarm. You know what I mean? And keep in mind, when we think lukewarm, we think water. So it's hard to catch fire from water. It is hard to get fired up about this thing, to dive in and to experience what is truly available if it's lukewarm. So I can look at myself and I can look, does my deportment shout? Or am I a little bit of a Caspar Milquetoast? Am I a little okay, well, if you want to, you can do some stuff. Or am I showing up with that joy and that enthusiasm? And it's not a facade. It's not putting on airs. Am I showing up with that connection? And I also want to know, when I say not putting on airs, not wearing a mask, that this thing is real. We're not going to be on fire all the time. We will have moments where life is hard because it is life. But am I doing this thing? So that is what is to shout at the new prospect, that we are a person with a real answer. And I talk about, and I have friends that talk about, this is a book of mirrors. I'm meant to hold up my experience to this book. As we go on bottom of page 2021, probably won't do that today. But what I'll do is we'll talk about the difference between the moderate drinker, the hard drinker, and the real alcoholic. And I want to hold up my experience to that. Is that me? But just as much as I want to hold up my experience to the diagnostic criteria of alcoholism, do I want to hold up my experience to the solution that is contained and the description of what it looks like to live in that state of being recovered, to live in that state of the spiritual awakening, to live in that fourth dimension? And I can ask myself, am I making the approach? Do I feel comfortable in sponsoring, in what I'm talking about? And of course, none of us do when we first start. But am I growing in that? Am I willing to ask for help? And I don't say any of this to shame anyone. If we've been around a while and we haven't sponsored, it's not your bad, feel bad. No, it is let us help you have this experience that is available to each and every one of us. Does my deportment shout? If my deportment isn't shouting, again, it's not feel bad, be sad. No. It's be glad I didn't mean for this to rhyme. That's the stupidest thing I've said. This big book study so far. We always got to add the yets when I'm saying weird stuff out of my face. Yet. But if my deportment doesn't shout, if I'm not on fire for this thing, it's not feel bad, it's not live in shame, that doesn't work. But let us help you have this experience. Catch this fire, catch this enthusiasm. Because what we have here is so much more powerful than just don't drink. Just don't drink, because I can't even do that. So it says that he is a man with a real answer. That he has no attitude of capital H, capital T, capital T, holier than thou. And when we talk about that I'm not sitting on some pedestal or some, I was going to say podium. I mean, we can have a podium. That's on the ground. But pedestals. And I always warn people, do not put me on a pedestal that is not wheelchair accessible. And if we get me up there, I don't know if we can get me down. And that's a safety issue. We have not consulted OSHA. I'm not at work. It's a vocation, or it's an avocation. That's a joke for the next paragraph. But that idea that we are shoulder to shoulder, that we are trudging, which is to walk and to move with purpose along a common journey. I am no better than anyone else here, and I'm no worse than anyone else here. But I have experience that I can share, just as you have experience that you can share. That's what we're talking about. If you want my help, I will do anything and everything I can if you're willing to do this. That it's not, I'm the sponsor, so what I say goes, and chirp, chirp, chirp. But it is that I will help you if you're willing. That we're shoulder to shoulder. So it says nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful. And I want to emphasize helpful, because as it pertains to sponsorship, as it pertains to working with others, that is a word that we're going to see here, but we're going to see again and again and again. I want to put on my cape of codependency is probably what it really is. But I want to put on my cape, and I want to here I am to save the day, like Mighty Mouse or whatever. I don't know if it's Mighty Mouse. But I want to show up. I want to be the hero. I want to fix. I want to save. Now, I know those of you who have worked with others and sponsored others, you guys absolutely cannot relate to that thing. You get a sponsor or a sponsee for the very first time, and you're imagining what you're going to say at their 1-year medallion. None of you guys can relate to that. Actually, I was getting a lot of people that were no. I'm okay, cool. Yeah, me neither. But it's that idea that I cannot save them, but I can offer them this way of life. And so it's a reminder that we are shoulder to shoulder. Can I be helpful? And helpful really is offering the tangible actions of the 12 steps as outlined in this book. And yes, we can do that incredibly, compassionately, lovingly, with understanding, and with a sense of urgency. It says that there are no fees to pay, which is good. Because if someone has ever worked with me, we go hard, and you'd be like, girl, you just want some overtime rate, No fees to pay. Keep in mind, that's obvious right now in 2025. When we're saying hey, connect with the newcomer, put your number in the chat, try to get the newcomer's numbers, that there is not going to be an installment plan of for only 4 easy payments of $49.99, you can get yourself a shiny new sponsor. I'm trying to do what's coming to my mind is the OxyClean guy. Is that bam, I don't know, the ShamWow guy? I don't know. Focus. ShamWow. I know, that's an old one. ShamWow. So that is obvious to us in 2025. But keep in mind, that was not obvious. That was not intuitive when this book was published in 1939. The world was experiencing the Great Depression. times were tough financially. And that idea that an alcoholic is going to help another alcoholic for free? That's a radical idea that is so obvious to us today because it works. That it says there are no axes to grind. So what that means is that we're not grinding those axes that like, you don't have to agree with me on everything, and that we're going to go and have a fight and we're going to like argue. No, it's none of that. It says no people to please. Now, I know there are some people here that are probably like, oh, I need a 12-step fellowship for that. There is one. It's Codependence Anonymous. But no people to please. Thank goodness, right? And we'll talk about this much later, but I figure if I'm going to ruin your day, I might as well just do it today. And I won't ask you to do a show of hands, but if there is anyone here who identifies as a people pleaser, what I want you to know is that I'll say it about me, is I thought I was a people pleaser, but I was grossly incorrect. Because I did not care if they were pleased. I cared if they liked me. So I am, and I'm going to say it politely, because I'm already pushing it if we're going to go over time, So I'm going to say it politely. I'm an approval suck. I am I'm a self-seeker. So there are no people to please, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. Although I will say, if you're coming to this study, you might have to endure a tangent or two. That's just par for the course. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for coming. And it says, these are the conditions we have found most effective. And I love that it talks about being effective. Because again, I can often show up, a little counterculture, a little contrariwise in regards to how I sponsor, to contemporary AA. Because where I live in the world, there's this sort of idea that you meet your sponsor once a week and you go through the book and, and it'll take you about a year to get through the steps. And I tried to sponsor that way because that's how I was sponsored. Nobody ever took me through the book. I wasn't sponsored in that way. But that's what I knew. And I found, and here's what I want to say. If how you're working with people is effective, ignore what I'm saying completely. But if you're like me and you're like, man, but people aren't getting and staying sober. That was my experience. I was working with people after people and they weren't doing it. Once a week wasn't working, and I knew that and I felt that in my heart. And so I do things a little different where I'm not meeting. If we're in the work, we're not meeting once a week. We're going every single day. And because, man, there's a sense of urgency. And, there are things the way in which I sponsor today, I sponsor in that way because what I have found is that it is effective. I stopped doing things that I did not find to be effective. And the result of that is I sponsor people in ways that I've never been sponsored. Some of you guys know that when I work with sponsees, when we're on step 4, I will sit with you for most of your 4-step. You got to do some work on your own, but I will sit with you. And what I found is that gets the 4-step done. I will sit with sponsees as we go through their amends. I will help them write out their amends because that gets the amends done. Whereas that was never done with me. So what I'm trying to say is if I'm working with others, if I'm sponsoring others, and I'm feeling like, man, people aren't getting this thing, I want to have a look at, am I being effective? Not with guilt, not with shame. Because again, shame is not an effective motivator, but that maybe indicates that something needs to change in how I'm approaching others and how I'm carrying the message. And we have a whole chapter dedicated to working with others, and there's some instructions in there. And going back to those might be helpful to see, what am I doing? Is it effective? Is it working? And that's what I feel I'm called to be, effective. Because people's lives hang in the balance. It goes on to say, after such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. And so this is a saying that would have been far more popular in the 1930s, but it's much less popular today because of its religious connotation. And so what is the story? And if you're not religious, don't worry about it. I'm just trying to explain the story so we can glean the meaning. You don't have to be religious. I'm not religious, but I do love borrowing from a whole lot of spiritual traditions. Well, like you can take the alcohol out of the alcoholic, but the alcoholic's still gonna steal things. But I'm just stealing things spiritually. So the story is it does come from the Bible. It's the story of there was this pit. I believe it was no, it wasn't. I was going to say it's the Lazarus pit, but I think I'm confusing that with Batman. And what happened to Ra's al Ghul and Batman? I don't. It might be, but I just in this moment I think like Lazarus might have been a different guy. I think it was a different guy. But there is this pool of water. And what would happen is people with physical, emotional, and other sorts of disabilities would congregate at that pool. And every once in a while, an angel would come down and stir the water, and whoever was the first person in the water would be healed. Again, this is a metaphor. And there was a gentleman who experienced paralysis. And he was hanging there on a mat, like the idea of lying in bed. And, the angel would come, stir the water, and because he experiences difficulties in his mobility, there is no way in which he would be able to make it to the water first. Now, in the story, Jesus came and he asked him if he wanted to be healed. And so and from that, he was able to take up his bed and walk again. So he was healed. Now, again, this is a metaphor. And what is the metaphor? And what is the metaphor as it pertains to us? Well, the parable, or the meaning beneath the parable, the meaning beneath the story, is that those who are the least likely to get well are the ones that can get well here. So if I've tried every other means, if I've tried the hot tub, the angel hot tub, I don't think that's what it's called either, hot tub time machine. But if I've tried everything, or at least I didn't try everything, but I tried everything I could think of, or I tried everything that applied to me. And if nothing that I have tried is worked, what I want you to know is that there is a solution here. And the solution works incredibly well. And it works perfectly for those who are aware that nothing else has worked. That's the takeaway of that story. It goes on to say, none of us makes a sole vocation of this work. Now, a vocation is that idea of paid employment. And some people will say, no, what that means is that you're not meant to sponsor other people 24/7. And I'm like, I actually don't think that's what that means. Because we're going to, in this very same paragraph, it goes on to say, all of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort we are going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated they can give nearly all their time to the work. So that couldn't be what it's talking about. What it's talking about is, occupation, profession, paid employment. And it says, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. Now, bear with me. If there's any of us here who have had therapists and counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, I have had the gambit. And you're probably here like, we can tell, wasn't very effective now, was it, Paige? Maybe go back, but here's my experience, is when people would help me and that was what they were paid to do, I'm like, yeah, but do you really care? Yeah, you know what I mean? There was a level of genuineness. Nope, that's not how you pronounce it. By the way, that's not the word of the day, so don't worry that I butchered it. But I'll show up a little disingenuine. I was going to take another stab at that word. I'm like, we're going to let that go. But because I didn't feel like they really cared, and there was that power dynamic, that position of authority. And so what we're saying is that we would not be more effective if we were professionals in doing this. It goes on to say, we feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning, that sobriety, we have to start with abstinence, but sobriety is not a solution to alcoholism. And this is a radical idea. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I thought all I had to do was get sober, right? Sobriety is not a solution to how, I mean, who did this spiritual bait and switch? I have been spiritually bamboozled. Like, what's going on with this? So, sobriety is not a solution to our alcoholism. And we can hold our experience up to that statement and see if it's true. Like, don't just take my word for it. Every time we drank again, were we sober? Every time I said I was never going to drink again, I put down the bottle. And I said I was done. But a day, a week, a month, several months later, I would pick it up and I would find myself drinking again. So what does that, if that's my experience, what does that tell me? It tells me sobriety is not a solution. Sobriety is not an answer. Every time I took that first drink, I was sober. I need something more than sobriety. Sobriety is not enough. The same person who came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous will drink again. What I need is a spiritual awakening. It goes on to say a much more important, and this word, demonstration. I am called to demonstrate, which isn't to talk about, which isn't to think about, to pontificate my ideas and my theories about, or to regurgitate things that I've heard in the meeting. And of course, I've done all those things. I'm not passing any judgment, but it's demonstrate. So what is asked of me is action. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. And I know some of you are like, we have affairs? That doesn't sound very spiritual. I mean, that just means in all areas of our life. But what we're talking about is that demonstration of our principles. Now, for me, the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous are not the concepts or nebulous ideas behind the steps. Like step 1 is honesty. Step 2 is hope. Step 3 is willingness. Step 4 is courage? I don't know. I think 8 is brotherly love. 9 is justice. Something like that, right? For me, those are not the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. But if that works for you and you're like, what? I'm sorry, what? I am perturbed. I am disturbed. I am at ill at ease with the words that you have said. You have aroused my gorge. What? Ignore me. You're right, I'm wrong. But here's the thing. When life is on me and there is fear that is gripping my chest, I can't pull courage out of nowhere. And when somebody is annoying me and I'm like, oh, Paige, you're on my last nerve. I know nobody at this meeting's felt like that. Thanks for coming. Paige, you're on my last nerve. I can't pull tolerance out of nowhere. And so for me, the principles are not these nebulous concepts, but instead the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous are the tangible actions of all 12 steps. And what it is saying is that it is far more important that I demonstrate practicing all 12 steps in every area of my life. That's what it's saying. That the 12 steps are not this project that I do for 30 days. And it doesn't take much longer than that to go through a set of steps, go through them quickly and thoroughly. It's not saying that it's a thing that I do between the prayers of the meetings. It is how I live my life outside of the prayers of the meetings. It is a way of life. And so I'm meant to practice these things in my home, in my work, in all areas of my life. And it goes on to say all. And I want to emphasize all of us. All of us. So who is the all of us? The all of us was originally the first 180 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you remember, back in the forward to the second edition, it gave us some percentages. It gave us some success rates. And it gave us essentially a success rate of 75%. So if I want that, I need to do what they did. And whenever we talk about the we, and we reference the first 180 or so members of Alcoholics Anonymous, what's important for me to understand, or at least what I believe, and again, if you disagree, you're right, you're right, I'm wrong. But that idea that if I do this work as outlined in this book, then I get to become a part of the we. I get to become a part of the all. So all, who is the all? It was originally the first 80 members, but today that all is every single one of us who has recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. All of us spend much, and I want to emphasize much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe. Not all of our spare time, but much. And what the effort that we are going to describe is working with others, carrying this message to others. The modern word for it would be sponsoring. All of us spend much of our spare time working with others, carrying this message to others. And the takeaway is that it is meant to be inconvenient. I'm not saying you can't have hobbies. I'm not saying you can't windsurf. I don't know why that's the hobby my brain always thinks of. Clearly, I don't have hobbies because I don't think there's many places to windsurf where I live. But you can windsurf, you can crochet, you can mountain climb. Oh, I got friends. There's a gentleman. When it's a little casual, he'll like climb or sprint up a mountain. But when it's a little more intense, that's when he like climbs the ice. It's fine. It's fine. You don't have to, you can do that if you want. But what we're saying is that I am meant to be a little bit inconvenienced. I need to be a little bit inconvenienced. And the reason is because, man, I don't know what I need. I think what I need is to binge watch a show and eat candy. And I think I need to focus on me. But that always got me drunk. And what happens when I work with somebody else? What happens when I carry this message to somebody else? Man, I find everything that I was looking for in the bottle. I was at a meeting last night and they were referencing steps 6 and 7 out of the 12 and 12 and the not so like gentle phrase nowadays, this is the step that separates the men from the boys. Now that came from Father Ed Dowling, who I will say was genuinely a champion of equality and acceptance in his time. So if you're like, I don't like that quote, that's fine, but don't hold that against Father Ed. He was a great guy. And I told this story, and for whatever reason, I feel called to tell it today. So this is the story of Father Ed. And the story begins in this like stormy, blustery day in New York City. And it takes place in the clubhouse in New York City. And Bill Wilson, I mean, Lois is out doing whatever Lois is doing. Lois is out and Bill Wilson is alone and it's night. And he had been, man, you can just imagine everybody was like bugging Bill about this and that and this and that. Hey, Bill, what about this? What about that? And he was lying in bed. And I want to point out he was lying in bed because in sobriety, Bill and Lois lost their house and were homeless. And they moved something like 50 times in a year or two. Rob will correct me. And he was living at this clubhouse. And he's like tired. He's burnt out. And Bill Wilson also struggled with depression, and the depression was on him. And it was one of those days where he's done. He's absolutely done. And a shadowy figure comes. And that the shadowy figure is greeted by another alcoholic who's hanging out at the clubhouse. And then the shadowy figure, the guy is like, goes and carries the message to Bill, like, hey, there's a guy here. I'm pretty sure he's homeless. Like, he's so disheveled. He's like, I'm pretty sure this guy, he's got a limp. He's walking with a cane. Like this I'm sure this is another hopeless drunk. And you know that moment where you just don't want to do it anymore and you're tired and you're like, oh, I want to watch my show, or I want to do my windsurfing. I don't know. But in that moment, Bill Wilson said, okay, yep, send him in. And Bill Wilson, fully expecting to meet with a wet drunk that he's going to help carry this message, who comes in the door is Father Ed Dowling, who had heard about Alcoholics Anonymous and who had heard what was happening in Alcoholics Anonymous and desperately wanted to get involved and connect and was inspired. And Father Ed Dowling, from that moment they met, he essentially became Bill Wilson's sponsor. spiritual advisor, if we don't want to use that word. And he helped Bill Wilson navigate through some incredibly dark times in his life. And what I want to point out is, if you're like, why do I have to be inconvenienced? It is because more often than not, and not more often than not, it is God always knows what's better for me than I do myself. Because on my willpower, I want to slam the door. And who shows up is the man who's going to help Bill Wilson and carry him through an incredibly dark period in his life. So all of us spend much of the spare time in the sort of effort which we're going to describe. And I want to point something out. Sometimes we hear the word balance in the rooms Alcoholics Anonymous, and that word is only found one time in the first 164 pages. And it's in regards to balancing our family commitment, our family responsibilities, and working with others. And if I am new to Alcoholics Anonymous, if I am coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous, if I've not had the spiritual awakening that we're talking about, if I'm not working with others, it's a little like showing up to the ICU. You know, all the tubes, all the machines, and being like, yeah, no, I know that you want to do emergency triage, but I'm a little busy right now. I got to find balance. You know, at no point in the ICU are they focused on balance. You know, we're not worried about a leisurely stroll or a bubble bath at that point. And when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I am in the ICU. This is life or death. This is that serious. You know, I have an illness that means that I cannot ever safely drink, and an illness that means that I will drink again. Man, this is fatal. This is fatal. So I've got to dive in. If I'm new, don't worry about balance. Don't worry about balance. And here's the thing about that word balance, is I always imagine being like a server at a restaurant, you know, and I'm balancing all these trays and all these plates. But who's at the center if I'm trying to find balance? It's me. And I ought not be at the center of my life. And if you're like, why? Well, I can tell you about my life. When I'm at the center of my life is a dumpster that is on fire, that is careening off a cliff. That is what it is like when I'm at the center of my life. Maybe y'all have better luck being at the center of yours. But girl, I'm a dumpster fire. I should find out like a French word for like dumpster, although it's probably like dumpster, but it's like dumpster flambe. That's who I am when I'm at the center of my life. So instead, is dumpster flambe the word of the day? No, no, it's not. But what do I seek to do? I seek to be God-centered. And part of the reason why is, you know, when people are talking about balance, does anyone ever know anyone that found balance? Ever? Just gonna throw that out? So listen, that might not be a possible task. So I prefer instead to be God-centered. And so it says all of us spends much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we are going to describe, which is 12-step work, carrying this message, sponsoring. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all of their time to the work. And that's somebody like me. That's what I do all day. And I maybe should get a hobby. Well, I do like watching birds. I don't get outside as much as I should though. All right. It goes on to say, if we keep on the way we are going, there is little doubt that much good will result. And so what they're saying is one alcoholic carrying the message to another alcoholic, one alcoholic working with another was working. It was working. People were getting sober and staying sober. There's little doubt that much good will result, but the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. If we didn't live in New York or Cleveland or Akron, Ohio, in those early years, we weren't likely to get this message because it was one person carrying the message to another. And I can tell you, I don't live in New York or Ohio. And so and this is what they saw. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. That people were dying needlessly from this illness. And they were watching it. Man, it's the people whose lives could have been saved if they were presented this opportunity. Many could recover if they have the opportunity we have enjoyed. Now, it might not feel like this if I've not done this work, but these 12 steps are an opportunity. If I'm sitting on them, it really does feel like absolutely not. I decline your business opportunity, but it is an opportunity. It is not something I have to do. It is something that I get to do, to be saved not only from death, but to be saved from a living death. Man, I don't have to. Oh, I have to. Man, I get to write inventory. I get to set right my wrongs. And you know what happens from that? Freedom. I get to be of use to other people. I get to see the miracle happen in their lives. I get to see the light come on in their eyes. I get to be free from the things that I never thought I could be free of. I get to experience who I truly am, which is who I always wanted to be. I get freedom from self-pity and self-hatred. I get free. I get to it as an opportunity. So those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by, hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Many could recover. If they had the opportunity we have enjoyed, there is joy here. There is joy in this work. There is joy on the other side of the spiritual experience. Joy. How then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? So how can we help those in the way that we have been helped? It says, we have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. So what they're saying is we wrote this book. This book was meant to go out to the world to carry this message that is working. And if you've ever played the game telephone, like in kindergarten, where it's like I like purple elephants, and then it goes around and it's like something completely different. You know, we're trying to carry this message. That's what it's trying to do because it was working. And it says, we shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. And so when it says the idea that they're trying to present is that this is a combined textbook. So the idea that I'm trying to present is that if I disagree with anything in this book, I'm actually disagreeing with the first 100 members, 80. And I got some news. It really wasn't a group conscience text. Bill wanted it to be. So it's not for harm or for Bill not trying. Bill wanted it to, he sent it off to Akron. It's like, give us our thoughts. And Dr. Bob was like, the people in Akron don't want you to write a book. So I'll just tell you they liked it. And then Bill was trying to get feedback from people in New York. And they're like, it's great, Bill. We love it. No notes, Bill. But here's the thing. Even though in 1939, Bill wanted it to be a group conscious textbook, and it wasn't quite that. What we can say is today it is. Today it is because, again, I get to, and I'm ending on this paragraph, don't worry, Jeff. I get to hold up my experience to this book. And so if my experience matches what's in this book, I am a part of the we. I've had the experiences that are outlined, that are promised. And so that this is not the opinion of one person. This is the opinion of each and every person who has recovered through following the directions as they're outlined in this book. And it says this should suggest, I will point out, it is only a suggestion, but we don't have alternatives. If you're like, I don't like that, that's fair. We don't have a plan B option. Well, actually, when we get to page 24, 25, we'll see what plan B is. We don't have a different option. But it says this should suggest a useful program, that this is useful, this is practical, and it is. If I go at this like my life depends on it, because it does, it is immensely practical. And it says for anyone concerned with the drinking program. So that's what's available. I gave you 1 minute. That's not great of me, but you said I could go over. Nobody tell Carolina. Well, we can all tell her. You wrap me out. Over to you, Jeff. Thank you so much.